going to be really fun. This is going to be this hopefully a series, um, and hopefully it's going to be about, at least from my perspective, it's going to be about UX design and research tools. So today we're going to be focusing on the big three, which is Sketch, Figma, Adobe XD. These have been pretty much consistent as far as like most of the projects that we've been working on internally, a lot of the side projects and stuff that we've worked on. So it's been pretty consistent that these three are the major tools in our industry right now. So I had a chance to sit down with Kola and with Eileen today to kind of go over what they kind of feel, how they want to rate certain features of the product, and then we can kind of go into the discussion about it. So I've kind of built this out into a few different parts and sections so we can kind of all walk through everything as a group. And then at the end, I've actually got some metrics from uxtools.com that actually answers a lot of these questions based on a poll of over 4,000 designers. So we can kind of compare and contrast of what our small group of three and larger group that's attending today kind of come up with in comparison to what a broader study has come up with. I think we'll have some really interesting discussions today. So let me share my screen and we'll get right into it. Okay, here's our lovely title slide. That's what we're talking about today. So the general title for this is what works and what doesn't. That's myself. I am the design director. Eileen, who's also a senior UX designer, and Kola, who actually just joined this week. So, big hand to our new InRhythmer, Kola, for coming in and jumping in last minute for this. Super, super appreciate both of you coming in for this. So again, this is what we're going to be talking about today. Sketch has been around pretty much since like 2015, even before. It's a cornerstone UX tool that we've used pretty consistently. Figma came out, I think it was 2015, where it was originally, I think it was crowdsourced, and then ended up getting a pretty large venture seed, and really now it's becoming a powerhouse in our industry just over the past couple of years, if nothing else due to the fact that we've been remote. Being able to have a lot of that functionality has really moved it up. And then the last, of course, is XD, which is my personal favorite, and the one I'll be advocating for quite a bit today, only because I was I was brought in very early to the iteration process of this particular product from an outsider XD perspective back in 2014. So three amazing products, and let's dig into them. So the first four questions I asked was about the design features in general. So the four questions I asked was, how do you feel about in-app tools, like the actual user interface of how to use all of the different all the buttons and contextual menus and etc. How are components created? How well does it manage a design system? And how flexible are the components that are being built? And I would like, actually, who would like to go first about talking about why they rated it what they did? And then we can continue the discussion through the larger group.
Go ahead, Kola.
Okay, so for me, actually, with all of these things that we're talking about, all of these different areas of these apps that we're talking about, I consistently had to rate them on a curve. Really, throughout, Adobe has historically put tons of money into being the best. XD is one of their latest products. Sketch, just as an overview for everyone, what are these tools? Sketch was really the first competitor and drew a ton of people away from Adobe by launching what at the time, it was actually 2010, what at the time was a really incredibly robust product that was not related to Adobe. And it was incredible. Like nobody had actually been able to compete with Adobe prior to that. And then Figma is the new kid on the block. As John said, really the last 2 years, it has just completely overtaken the market. And it's largely because of their collaboration tools. I mean, that's going to come up a ton because it's really where Figma just crushes everyone. The live edit is amazing. In terms of in-app tools and functionality, it's a lot of comparing them to each other. XD has the Adobe family edge, and I'm going to say that over and over again because that's its big thing. If you're in Adobe, I came from a visual design background, so I've been using Adobe products since 2007. So I just know them. I know all of them. The key commands are wired into my brain. And as a result, XD is going to be really quick to pick up because it's all the same. It's all in the family. Figma is a shift. You're in a different look, different feel, different commands, different names for things. It's going to be different in that way. And Sketch also has that issue as well.
Yeah, I agree with quite a few points there, especially with like the design system management. I think Sketch is really great at what it does, but it's also hindered by the fact that its community kind of decides how things roll out. It's a lot of third-party plugins, and as far as like how the Sketch libraries operate versus how Figma's component library and XDCC libraries work, I completely agree. I feel like unless you are not building the iconography libraries and custom illustration work, if you're only concerned with product design, then Figma is absolutely like the superior tool for this type of work. But when it comes to actually building stuff from scratch, I feel like Adobe does it a little bit better. What do you think, Eileen?
Yeah, so I'm probably like the worst person to be on this panel because I don't use any of these. I use Photoshop, of course, but with that said, I like Cola am like an Adobe fangirl. Like that's my background, so it was really easy to get into it, and so it was like my first tool of choice. And so maybe I'm biased that way, but it's just so easy to use, and I enjoy being that Adobe fangirl, being that advocate. So I love Adobe, but Sketch does do a really good job with UI design and just building out features and reusing those components over and over. Figma, all threes, because I think 3 is like the neutral rating. I haven't had a chance to really deep dive into Figma, which I am planning to do. I wish I would have done it before this, but I didn't have the chance. But Figma is that bright, shiny coin that you want to pick up, right? So it's amazing that I think it just turned 5 years old, but its community is like amazing. It has such a strong community, and the people there, they're really adamant about sharing what they've built, talking about their design ideas. So it's really something that appeals to me because I'm a lifelong learner. So in terms of usage, I would probably say XD, especially if you are used to or have used Adobe products in the past, that learning curve is really easy. And then as far as like excitement, I would say Figma is that thing that you keep hearing and that you want to try. So that's my thought.
Awesome. No, it's good to know that not everybody gets a chance to get exposed to all 3 of these. So I appreciate you kind of coming in and even giving an outsider's perspective, because that's really important as far as like brand perception, etc. Anybody from the audience? We have a couple of minutes to take questions on each one of these. If not, we're going to keep on trucking.
Yeah, I just have a. Go ahead, Liam. Want to go ahead?
No, sorry. I was going to ask, like from a client perspective, like what do clients typically look for? Or is it kind of divided across industries, or do we get to decide ourselves? Like what's the typical protocol when we're going into a project?
Protocol for going under a project is standard when we want, as an agency or a consultancy, we want to adapt to whatever they are doing. So if a client has Sketch, we adapt to Sketch. If a client has Figma, we adapt to Figma. A lot of these are very similar. So the reason why we're actually discussing this today is to talk about the differences, to talk about how different programs can work for different people. A lot of legacy folks that have invested very heavily in UX and UI very early are more Sketch shops. Folks that are kind of catching up to the curve are moving towards Figma. And folks that are really invested in asset generation and brand kind of brand building, essentially, to be able to have the wide variety of services that Adobe offers, or if they're already paying for Adobe, it makes sense for them to have XD. So some of it kind of depends on what our clients already have in their ecosystem, and then we make a recommendation based on what they have available, what their budget is, and how they choose to work. Anybody else?
I always say this, but I think also security is one of the things, is one of the reasons why Sketch is never going away for now. Because even at the clients where I'm now, they chose Sketch because they don't want to be on any sort of cloud. So that is also, even if they do pay for Adobe, for example, but they don't want any, they're okay with using InVision. They feel like the InVision gives them more security, and not all the assets are in InVision anyway. So
yeah, you bring up a good point. Sometimes InfoSec also decides it. But I can say from experience, when I was at Publicis, they did an incredible job with doing penetration testing with all of the Creative Cloud services. And they found little to no chances of ever, breaking, outside, so some folks are a little insecure about cloud. And hopefully, they can talk to their Adobe representative to find out what they need to do in order to get those questions met and get that penetration testing done. But I know at the enterprise level, they offer those services.
Especially with the, smaller companies who might not have their own InfoSec team, and also they just be conservative, and then they don't want to go that way.
Absolutely. So totally understandable. Let's move to the next slide. We got a few to get through. Let's talk about prototyping a little bit. Now, I know we've kind of overarchingly talked about the three of them, but let's get really into the details. Prototyping is extremely important because it helps us build stuff really quickly. Whether or not that is actually translatable for developers is kind of another piece of the puzzle. So the 4 questions we asked here were, when you're prototyping inside these apps, I wanted to get everyone's thoughts on how quickly can you get in and out, how easy is it to prototype, are you allowed to have collaboration and commenting, and how do you feel about the animation examples that they have built in, whether it be easing or transitions or etc. Which of these offers solid options?
Yeah, so for this one, again, starting with Adobe XD, this is what I would say would be my go-to if I wanted a tool that had all the things that I need to design and ideate and then hand off to developers, because you can create like really small things like icons, and you can create artboards and screens, and then you can prototype them like all in one application. So and it's just as simple as like switching tabs within the application. And I love that. And Adobe's growing more and more with like their animation effects, and they're making that just like a really, really more robust functionality within that app. Whereas with Sketch, I'm having to rely on other applications to prototype my designs. And when we say prototype, we mean like string together a bunch of screens and show what that interaction is. So if you have a login screen, how does that look transitioning from login into whatever app you're trying to log into, right? What does that interaction look like? Are there any animations? Are there any like sparkles that appear when you're logging in? Or what does that look like? And for XD, and I believe Figma does this really well too, you can really bring that to life and make it look pretty realistic to what you want it to look like, in a live environment. Whereas with Sketch, you have to, well, for me personally, there are like really rudimentary prototyping capabilities in Sketch, but you really have to rely on other parties to bring your designs to life, so to speak. So with that, I really gave Sketch low ratings, and it's not even the fact that I have to go to a third party, but sometimes a third party doesn't even work properly. And so that's frustrating because I really need to get my stakeholders' opinions. I need to get them to see this and see what my vision is. And sometimes Sketch hinders that.
Yeah, I agree. Kola, what do you think?
Totally agree. And building immediately off of Sketch, it's my favorite example for designers that are just starting out of you don't have to be the first on the market. You just have to be the best, because Sketch was amazing when it came out, but they did not do a very good job continuing to research and understand how designers wanted to use their tools. And their prototyping is just, it's so much manual work, and it's so much reliance on plugins and third-party apps.
Yeah,
Figma.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No. I totally agree with all that, because you're right. Like, they didn't even have a prototyping tool until what, last year before?
They said they
2019?
weren't ever going to make one. Figma and XD made them because they came out and were like, look, people want this. And Sketch was like, okay, I guess we'll try.
No, because you're right. Because then you have to rely on something like Flinto or ProtoPie or Principle or something to be able to pull stuff out of. And then there's, if there's stuff doesn't want to talk to each other, then you have other issues. So yeah, I completely agree with the assessment we put in here. Anyone from everyone from the group, our peanut gallery, want to throw in some 2 cents about prototyping? Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about developer handoff features. I see all of our devs kind of lean forward a little bit. So the 4 questions we asked here were about developer review or code review areas, being able to have responsive capability inside the platform, having an asset and code repository that's included in the system without a third party, and then third-party plugins. Like, what do certain programs have available to be able to influence better developer handoff, and do they work well? So I kind of felt, again, like XD is really, really great for this. They have a fantastic developer view. It's code for their code view, where it's the exact same page as design review and collaboration, and you simply switch how you want to look at the exact same page. So when you're looking at an artboard, you have the ability to switch between having a developer view, which houses all of the assets, all of the font stylings, all of the CSS, and you can switch back to commenting to see what other people have to say about certain design aspects of it, or any developer comments they may have. Kola, you want to go first with this one? What do you think about?
Yeah, sure. I would say,
handoff?
again, it's just a competition between Figma and XD. I have found the additions that they made for Dev Handoff for me were not robust enough to make them worth their while. Like, the switching between views can be really handy, but generally their normal design view is not so different from what you're seeing as a developer. And I think Figma's done a really good job in terms of their inspection and being able to really see how things look and work. Sketch, I would agree actually with John's 5 on third-party plugins, and I think it's out of necessity. In the very beginning, they really relied on their community to build features. That's just how it worked. So from the get-go, they had tons of features and plugins for developer handoff. Nothing out of the box. I think Adobe XD really shines in when you start it up for the first time ever and you've never downloaded any external plugins or anything. It's got it all.
Well, I gave third-party plugins a 2 because I'm the worst person for this because I don't go for.
You mean best. You mean best.
Well, okay, so hear me out, please. I am the type of person who likes everything. You know, you give me something, I'll work with it. And I'm also the type of person where if you give me a tool, I'll use it, but I won't go for like enhancements necessarily. I won't go out there and look for. So maybe it's because I know that all these amazing plugins are out there, but it's like I have to go and look for it, and I you know, if it doesn't work for me, then that's wasted time. So maybe if there's like more of an educational aspect behind it, or maybe if there's like, you know, something that will attract me more to plugins, then great, because I don't see any of that like plugin promotion or anything, no advocacy of plugins within Sketch itself. So maybe that's why I'm out of the loop about it. So maybe if there's more of a tie-in in the app, I'd be more inclined to check it out.
That's actually a really good call, because both Figma and XD actually promote a lot of their plugins, whether they're third party or, you know, built by Adobe. They both have really amazing developer forums to be able to talk to people on how to build these plugins correctly, and any of the quirks or challenges they have with building them. So there's a lot of community support around building plugins for Figma and XD on the platforms of Figma and XD, whereas Sketch, everything is kind of like a free-for-all. Any comments from the audience before we move on?
Developers, we need to hear from you. What do you like to see?
I was,
Yeah, I'm
I was,
curious. Go ahead.
oh, sorry. Go ahead. You're
I was
muted.
going to say, I'm curious which developers prefer receiving their handoffs from.
Well, I'm not sure. My question was a little related to something else, but while I was waiting to ask the question, I kind of looked it up and I somewhat got my answer, but I want to hear from you guys. What's the support on each of these for Tailwind CSS? So like to provide the developer code with the styling with Tailwind CSS.
Might be a little out of my purview.
All-in-one solution for designing, prototyping.
I mean, I can't speak to any type of CSS in general, but I do know that it provides pretty standard code output, depending on what area and asset you're looking at in the developer view for XD.
So, but that means that every developer needs to have XD.
No, you can actually go to the their browser view, where it's actually you just need an Adobe ID, which is free.
Okay, so at that point it would be like using Sketch and InRhythm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sorry I can't give a more pointed answer for that, but I'll definitely look into it.
That's okay. The answer I saw here, apparently, I see XD has some third-party libraries that you can integrate that would give you all the CSS on a Tailwind format, basically.
Yeah, I actually want to check out the third-party plugin that XD now has for Flutter. It looks amazing.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. And this is new actually. Maybe we should review it in our next lightning talks. I've been working with this lately with Sketch and InRhythm. Sketch has a new specs for developers that are actually really good, and Carlos and I have started to use it. And you can comment, you can collaborate. I can tell him, it's. I think it makes our life a little easier, and it's easier to communicate than it used to be with Sketch before. But yes, with Sketch, you need InRhythm.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. InRhythm actually does have an amazing SME design library that works seamlessly with Sketch, and Kika can attest. Like, she's been doing some amazing work in there with Carlos. It from what I can tell, you're right. Like, it does have an amazing amount of potential, and that's something we definitely shouldn't overlook. But today it's just single programs. So yes, I mean, I love when third-party programs work out perfectly. I hope Sketch can continue down that path of being very extremely friendly with playing nice with other programs. So let's move on to the design system management stuff. So I kind of feel, again, like Sketch does a really good job But the reason why I gave it a 4, or I gave kind of low scores here, is it's pretty simple to update components. The repositories, I mean, again, it kind of depends on third party, where we're talking about, where we're mentioning with like InVision and other systems to be able to get stuff onto a platform where it's accessible. And then ease of access, like how simple or easy to be able to grant access to Sketch libraries. And then like version control, I think is also kind of challenged a little bit inside Sketch. But that's one of the wonderful things about, I feel like the other two do really well, is because they are more cloud powered, then version control kind of becomes less of an issue. Access is less strict when it comes to being able to gain access to certain types of libraries, and also being able to work in browser like Figma does. It makes it really simple to be able to push out and get things approved really quickly, versus where even like XD kind of struggles a little bit with certain kind of updates. But I definitely want to hear from everybody else. Kola, what do you think? What's your feelings on each one of these for DLS?
Yeah, I would agree. In general, just Sketch is reliant on its plugins and its third party in order to be a fully featured program. Otherwise, it's really just a mock-up tool. But Figma and XD, both really out of the box, have great systems for handling design system management. And actually something I had wanted to mention in developer handoff, I really like Figma's browser-based application because it works everywhere. You can run it on Linux, right? So like Sketch, you can only run on Mac. XD is Mac and PC. Figma, you can use on anything that runs a browser. And that's really, I think, super, super important. And it's part of that collaboration tool. In addition to being able to run it anywhere, you can live edit, 2, 3, 10 people at a time from anywhere. And that really just pushes it, I think, to the next level in this particular field, right? In what we're doing, you need a lot of different people touching a file, and version control is super, super important. And XD and Figma both do a good job with it. Figma's better.
Yeah, just
when XD fails, it fails hard, and it's bad.
Just to let the audience know a little bit more about these programs, XD and Sketch, really only one person works on the file at one time, whereas in Figma, you can invite other collaborators to design like in tandem with you, and you'll see like their little cursor moving around like around the page. So that's why Figma is really powerful in versioning and sharing and all those aspects, because you can have collaborators simultaneously working on a single file.
Well, XD does have co-editing.
Yeah. It rolled out co-editing last year, and it rolled out live editing like Figma in beta at the end of last year. I don't know if I haven't been in it in a little bit. I don't know if
it hasn't gone live yet. It's still in pre-release.
Okay. Yeah. And that's why when I said when it fails hard, I was working in a file in beta with live editing, and Adobe released an update and it broke everything, and we lost everything. And that's a problem. Yeah. Adobe was really nice about it. They pulled everything down from the cloud for me, and they were like, here's it all back. But it was a harrowing 48 hours. And,
I bet.
And it, of course, right when you're at the end and it's due and you got to start really moving fast. But Figma, I think, has the advantage there in terms of their live edit just being really seamless, and it's been there from the beginning, and that makes such a huge difference in design system management, in component editing, in all of those places.
Yeah. Just before we move to the next slide, the reason why I gave Figma a 3 for some component updates is because components need to be built correctly. And in Figma, sometimes you're prompted to move so quickly that when you're building your component library for your master components, they're not built correctly. So like it's not centered, it's not aligned the right way, the padding is off. If your frames are not built appropriately to handle the kind of work that your designers are going to be doing, you need to get someone who knows Figma inside and out, backwards, frontwards, sideways, because anytime you make an adjustment to a master component, it affects the entire system. I mean, that also can be said for XD as well, but XD is a little bit more user-friendly when it comes to its internal component libraries and then its Creative Cloud libraries. So you have access to asset repositories and component libraries. Whereas Figma, it's anything that's a master component could technically be manipulated in a certain kind of way. So if you don't plan to have it react in a certain way, button stretches this way, certain things realign if you pull up to down, you need to think about those things before you build them. And that's it. So next slide. Last one for our rating system. Let's talk about the other stuff, things we missed. Brand perception. I want to say learning and education that this particular brand can provide, and then platform and operating system access, and of course, all important, pricing model. Who's first?
I'll go.
Oh, yay.
Yep.
There you go. So yeah, I think Figma and SD are leading in more of the educational aspects, because again, there are such great communities out there that are so gung-ho about both Figma and XD. I haven't heard so much about Sketch, but I do know they have a lot of resources. It's just, I feel like the audience is more engaged with Figma and XD. Figma, there's a lot of people that I see on Twitter talking about using the tool and features that they're creating, all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. XD, they have Behance to back them up, and they'll bring in designers from all over the world just to hang out, really, to while they're working and using the program, so you can kind of follow along with them. And they're always featuring these new designers, or maybe not new designers, but all these different types of designers, like graphic design, UX designers, photographers. So there's a whole big community behind Adobe. Brand perception, Adobe is like hands down, like super recognizable. People know them. Figma is really getting out there also. Again, there's a lot of commotion about them in a good way. For Sketch, I was thinking about this metaphor like this whole time. When people say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, I think they're talking about Sketch, but they are like, they're recognizable, but now you're like, okay, well, have they come out with anything new? And Sketch is, they're a good tool, but I feel like they're lacking in accessibility with different devices and stuff, because they are only available on Mac, but they're starting up their cloud-based model, and that's going, but I don't think it's there yet. And so with the pricing model, I think Figma and XD, they're really, really affordable. XD and Figma, they offer their programs for free, so that you can dabble in them, and it's an unlimited like free time until you actually want to push out on a design. That's when you would have to pay. Sketch is good because you pay it once, and that's good. That's if you don't care about having all the updates afterwards. So you pay once, which is like $100. And that is attractive to a lot of people too, because they just pay it once and they're good with it. Whereas Figma and XD, you get that free tier, but then after that, it's like a monthly subscription model. So
yeah.
Anything for you guys to add?
Yeah, I would agree.
The main thing that we also need to say about Adobe XD and Figma is that once your membership expired, you cannot access your file anymore. So that's also something that it's important to say, even if, I do like Figma, it's probably my favorite. But regarding the pricing model, it's also the most expensive one. No, probably XD is.
Yeah, XD. I think I think comparatively, if there's single app, it's not so bad. But if you
Yeah.
want everything that Adobe has to offer, it's like I think around 70 to 75 bucks a month per individual for the master suite. And if you're corporate, it's double, almost triple that. So just because of the platforms and the services that it offers for enterprise level. But yeah, I agree. I think Sketch is actually, it used to be $100 and that was it, but I think it's a yearly subscription now.
No, it moved completely.
No, because we just bought it for Admina Health. And so, yeah, I'm sure it's still, I think it was 79 and now it's 99.
That's not bad.
No.
All right, well, we are getting short on time, so I'm going to go through what the rest of the world has to say. Well, this is basically our notes that we kind of felt on. We kind of went over this already, but the general consensus I kind of feel like is that Figma is hot right now. XD is second place in keeping pace, and Sketch is kind of taking its time, but at the same time still walking along with everybody else. So there's a lot of really great potential from all three. And again, choosing which one is going to be right for your client is always going to be dependent on multiple different angles. So when asked around, was it 3,000, almost 3,000 designers were asked this question, what do you think about using this for UI? And most people are using Figma right now. A lot of people are still using Sketch, and Adobe XD is catching up. There are still folks on other tertiary programs. I know Framer has become really hot lately, so is Protopie, as far as like prototyping tools, which we're getting into next. Again, a lot of people are using Figma. InRhythm is still number 2, but Adobe XD is very close to closing that gap. All these were taken last year for surveys. So even currently, this definitely could be changed. Principal, Protopie, and even just code is outperforming things like UXPin and Webflow, Proto.io. And then developer handoff, again, people are still sticking with Figma. They like how it works. They like how it translates over to code. Zeppelin is still in the industry, only I think because it's free for the most part. So if you don't have to pay for it, people are going to use it. InRhythm again, still coming up with their systems design programs. Abstract, I've had some experience with, and that does work very well. Marvel is good too. Avocode is a little bit more advanced. Then managing design systems, again, Figma, the lead. Sketch coming up.
Did Figma do this survey?
No, actually, this was all done by uxtools.com.
Oh, okay.
So I wanted to find a neutral party. I didn't want to like completely dump Figma, over everybody, but it is being heavily used. And I wanted to show that across all of these, except for obviously like things we're not touching today, like user testing, is really important as for our industry. So that's what we have for today. And